Hey team, the Entourage is turning 11, and as such, I thought I'd collate my core principles in terms of how do you build an 8-figure business that is scalable, sustainable, and most importantly, can grow beyond you. The Entourage reached 8 figures in 2015 after starting the company in 2010. And then due to government regulations in the education sector, which was a space we ventured into for a couple of years, changes to that space in 2016 meant that we actually went back to being a 7-figure business for a couple of years and then got back to that 8-figure mark in more recent years for the second time. So having built businesses that have reached 8 figures, as well as having invested in businesses that have reached 8 figures, 9 figures, and even 10 figures. I was an early investor in an Australian company that recently became a unicorn, which is a business that goes from $0 to $1 billion inside of 10 years. And so having built 8-figure businesses, having invested in 8, 9, and 10-figure businesses, these are my core 11 lessons I've learned scaling businesses to 8 figures and beyond. I want you guys, whether you're taking notes on iPads or pads and pens or computer, however you take notes, provided you're not driving, there's going to be a lot in this discussion, so make sure you are taking notes, particularly if you're a 6 or 7-figure business owner and you've got 8 figures on your horizon. These are the core 11 things that I wish I had have known 10 years ago that I can pass on to you today. So let's get into it. Principle 11. Each stage is going to require a different style of management and leadership. And let me explain what I mean by that. When a business is between 0 and 100K in annual revenue, it requires a different style of management to when a business is from 100K to $1 million in annual revenue, which requires a significantly different approach to when a business is doing over $1 million or up to the $10 million mark. The things that we often advise businesses to do at 7-figure mark, like planning, developing KPIs, developing reportability, starting to develop the infrastructure such that the company can grow beyond you, are the very things that you should not be doing from 0 to 100K. 0 to 100K, we need to be improvising. We need to be interacting with consumer. We need to be making it up as we go along. And there's not a lot of value to planning because things change so frequently. And so if you can imagine a business from 0 to 100K is all about go-to-market, interact with consumer. Don't plan too much. Don't spend too much time on processes and systems. You don't need them yet. And the business is going to change so much that by the time the system is written, it will no longer be relevant. From 100K to $1 million, we need to focus primarily on sales and marketing, and often to the detriment of operational perfection and operational excellence. Operational imperfection is almost a necessary evil from 100K to $1 million. However, when we get to $1 million, particularly 2 or 3 million, we now need to start placing more emphasis on those areas which I just told you not to worry about before you got there, right? And so we do need to start worrying about infrastructure. We do need to start worrying about systems, structure, strategic planning, operational planning. Everything that you should not have done when you begun are the very things that you need to now start doing when you're reaching 7 and 8 figures. So understand that as a business goes through different stages, it requires a different style of management and leadership. The number one glass ceiling I see on 7-figure business owners is that the business is now doing 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, whatever it might be, and it's still being managed the same way it was when it was doing 400K a year, 600K a year, 800K a year. As a business evolves and matures, as must your management and leadership style with it. Principle number 10. When you get to the $1 million mark, when you hit 7 figures, right? So you're on the way to that 8-figure mark. The number one paradigm that needs to shift is you need to start thinking who, not how. Generally speaking, the story of the entrepreneur goes like this. Entrepreneur starts business. And as entrepreneurs, we have a great feel for the market. We have a great empathy for consumer. And at a high level, we're able to develop a high-level product strategy in terms of how we're going to address that market demand and how we're going to speak to that consumer need. And in the early years, what drives the growth of the business are characteristics that come really naturally to us as entrepreneurs. Make it up as you go along, break through brick walls, cover up the stuff-ups along the way, improvise, alchemize, create something out of nothing. And the business is of such a size that one person can wrap their arms around it. However, as the business grows and the business grows and the business grows and the business grows, it gets to a point where the business is now too large for one person to wrap their arms around, right? In most cases, we're doing more marketing. So we've got more leads coming through the door. If you're doing more revenue, I guarantee you're doing more sales, right? So there's a greater emphasis on moving people through a buyer's journey in a way that is elegant and systemized. If revenues have increased, we know we've got more customers. Operational complexity has grown. There's more cash coming in. There's more cash going out. There's certainly more people in the team. There's more HR issues. There is simply more of everything right across the business. And inevitably what we find is when an entrepreneur gets to the 7-figure mark, so again, they're on the journey to getting to an 8-figure business, what the entrepreneur has stopped doing is everything that they were great at, driving the business forward, shaping the organization, developing and driving the business towards a very compelling vision. And they've started to do everything but that. The entrepreneur is buried in spreadsheets. They're optimizing CRMs. They're writing processes. They're putting out daily fires. They're dealing with HR issues. They're managing immediate cash flow. The entrepreneur has become operations manager at best and admin assistant at worst. And there's nothing wrong with being an ops manager or an admin assistant other than as an entrepreneur, there are 3 things that are wrong with it, which is, number 1, we're not good at it, right? If you've built a business to 6 figures or 7 figures, there is something that is seriously capable about you. You've got a lot of potential. However, if we bury you in the detail of the operational muck of a business, well, then not only are you not good at that, but you're also not doing the things that you are good at, right? The second thing that's wrong with it is it's not why you started a business. You don't start a business in order to be buried in the operations. And number 3, it's not your highest and best use. It's not the stuff or the elements that you can contribute the most to the organization. And so as we go up the growth curve, the core fundamental paradigm needs to shift from when we're in that startup mode, when we're in 6 figures or doing early 7 figures, it's like as the business requires more, our solution to that as entrepreneurs is we will personally do more. And so as it needs more marketing, as it needs more sales, as it needs more customer delivery and customer care, as it needs more operational sophistication, historically, your solution to that was the business needs more, therefore I'll just do more. It's this whole, if we want 1 unit of output, the entrepreneur thinks that they need to deliver and put in personally 1 unit of input. That is the fundamental paradigm shift that needs to change. We need to stop thinking, how do I do this? And start thinking, how do I best create an ecosystem that empowers and enables other people to do this, often better than I would be able to on a consistent basis. And so the focus shifts from being purely on us and our level of output on any given day or our level of input on any given day to how good are you at building an ecosystem that enables other people to do their best work. So we're starting to build strategy. We're starting to build structure. We're starting to build infrastructure where 1 unit of input from the entrepreneur can create literally 1,000 units of output for the business. Now, when we start to build businesses through this paradigm, everybody benefits. The customer benefits because the organization is now a lot more streamlined because it's not bottlenecked by what one person can do. The team benefits because you're now building things out and they're no longer bottlenecked by what one person can do. And ultimately, the company benefits because the scale is not restricted, again, by what one person can do. And so when you get to the early 7-figure mark, you need to start thinking who, not how. When something arises, don't think to yourself, how can I do this? How can I learn how to do this? Think to yourself, who can do this more passionately and more capably than I can? And how do I best engage and empower and enable that person to do exactly that? Principle number 9. We need to move from technician to entrepreneur. As entrepreneurs, we can be wearing any number of 4 hats. We can be wearing the hat of the technician. Now, the technician is the person or the people with their hands on the tools, right? The people doing the do. We can be wearing the hat of the manager. And the manager is the person managing the people with their hands on the tools, right? The person managing the people with their hands on the tools and often contributing to the work that they're overseeing as well. We can be wearing the hat of a leader, which is very distinct from manager. Leadership is this: to what degree are my people intrinsically motivated to perform? It is very different and distinct from management. One of my core gripes about traditional business thinking and traditional business literature is that they conflate leadership and management as if they're the same thing. They're not. They have nothing in common other than the fact that there's people at the center of both of them. They have nothing in common. Management is KPIs. Management is weekly accountability. Management is weekly check-ins. Management is project development. Management is project management. Management is performance management, right? Leadership is, to what degree do we have a vision in this organization that people care about? Leadership is, how do we treat each other around here? Leadership is, how do we communicate and cooperate? Leadership is, to what extent do we genuinely care, not just about our teammates, but about our customer, right? Management is head, leadership is heart. The fourth hat that we can be wearing is the hat of entrepreneur. Now, entrepreneur in a strict definition is perhaps a lot more operationally diluted than what you may have thought previously. If you're just wearing the hat of entrepreneur, your role in the business is literally, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, send me a board pack 7 days before the board meeting. I'll contribute questions and agenda items. I'll help you with high-level strategy. I'll make sure we stay on path to high-level strategy. If you need networks, call me. If you need capital, call me. Here are the keys, drive, right? That's entrepreneur. If you're purely in entrepreneur mode, you're probably working in and on, more on, but both, cumulatively maybe 2 hours a fortnight, right? Please write this down, guys. Entrepreneurs build assets. Entrepreneurs build assets. And we build assets that can operate without us. Now, one of the things I love about this generation of SMEs coming up in Australia by now, and I don't say SMEs by age, but by stage. So, the businesses that are coming up the growth curve across, across the world right now, is many of us don't want to just be wearing the hat of entrepreneur. We also want to be wearing the hat of leader as well. And so the intent here is to move yourself up this ladder from technician to manager to leader to entrepreneur, right? To get to a point where you are able to spend 100% of your time wearing the hat of entrepreneur, guiding the organization, strategizing the growth of the company, envisaging where the company can go over the next 10 years, and building it as an asset that can operate without you. Once you've gotten to a point where you've built an organization, you've got the strategy and the structure in place that enables you to do that, you can then choose. If you want to play leader, you can play leader. A lot of you may want to play technician some of the time. But even once you've earned the right to play entrepreneur 100% of the time, I still encourage you to play technician at least 5% of the time. Now, why do I say that? It's incredibly important that you jump back into technician at least 5% of the time so that you stay connected to consumer, so that you stay connected to the team, so that you stay connected to the company, right? However, you're doing that because you want to, not because you have to, right? And so we need to ascend from being a technician and the core or the sole manager in the organization. How do you know if you're still there? Because you're the one that's still best at everything. And if you've got a small team or a growing team, you're the one that everybody still comes to when they've got a question or a challenge. That's how you know you're wearing technician and manager hats and you're not yet in leader entrepreneur. Now, how do we ascend up this ladder from technician to entrepreneur? The answer is two things: strategy and structure. And what's the framework we build strategy and structure through? That leads me to principle number 8. 8-figure businesses have developed 6 elements. I'll say that again. 8-figure businesses have developed 6 elements. It is through these 6 elements that I build 8-figure businesses. It is through these 6 elements that we do our strategic planning. It is through these 6 elements that we build teams and design org charts. It is through these 6 elements that we measure and manage performance. It's through these 6 elements that we drive profitability. It's through these 6 elements that we do our operational and our project planning. It's through these 6 elements. This is literally the blueprint for building a business that is scalable and sustainable. See, here's the thing. It's easy to drive growth for a temporary period of time in a way that's unstructured and that doesn't really stand the test of time, right? Just about anybody can do that. You can drive significant growth for a couple of years, it'll plateau eventually, or worse, it'll decline and the business will get into real trouble. What we need to be doing as CEOs and entrepreneurs is building companies that are cross-functional and that are well-structured, that allow you to both drive growth and enable that growth concurrently. And we do all of that by driving and developing the 6 elements. Now, what are they? Look at your business as a workflow, right? Not to take the romance out of it too much, but look at it as a production line, right? We go out into the world and we generate interest and attention. We call that marketing. So that's the first element, is marketing. That interest and attention then walks through the door, for most of us metaphorically speaking, for some of you literally. At that point, it's our job to turn that interest and attention into a paid customer. That's element number 2, sales. Once we've marketed it, we've sold it, what do we then need to do? We then need to deliver the product, right? And so the third element is product development and delivery. And all of my businesses are service-based businesses. Over 50% of our member-based businesses are service-based businesses. But I use the term product unanimously because even when we have a service-based business, we should look to modularize it. We should look to bottle its magic such that we can scale its magic. So I use the term product pretty much unanimously. The third element is product development and delivering. The fourth element, which becomes increasingly important as we go up the growth curve, is operations. And what I mean by operations is the internal workings of the business, the systems, the processes, the tech that underpins it, as well as how well are each of these 6 different elements talking to each other. We've marketed it, we've sold it, we're delivering the products we've developed, we're operationalizing it. There's really only one thing left to do, and that is to count and manage the money. The 5th element we call finance, right? And so I said there's 6 elements. We're really only doing 5 things. The 6th element is the element that brings those 5 things to life. The 6th element is our people. Inherent in our people strategy are our leadership principles, our management cadences, our meeting and planning and performance rhythms, right? But as we scale from 6 figures to 7 figures and then to 8 figures, what generally happens is as entrepreneurs, we tend to be lopsided. You will either favor marketing and sales, right? The outside stuff, the drive growth stuff, or you'll favor product and ops and finance, the internal stuff, the enable growth stuff, right? Where sustainable scale happens is where we are developing in a structured way infrastructure, people, and process right across these 6 elements in such a way that we are building a well-rounded company. These 6 elements exist whether you are aware of them or not. They are determining how sustainable your company is, whether you are aware of them or not. And the key to sustainable growth is to be able to balance these ongoing and often competing demands across marketing, sales, product development and delivery, operations, finance, and people. The goal here, team, the goal here is to become a well-rounded CEO, or if you've got a CEO in place, a well-rounded entrepreneur, building a well-rounded company. If you are doing all of these 6 things effectively, and you're doing all of them thoroughly, and you're doing all of them in a way that's considered, then you will be driving seriously sustainable growth. Which leads me to principle 7. All growth is sales and marketing led. Along the journey of your growth curve, there will inevitably be points and periods of plateau where you've been growing, at an accelerated rate, and then you hit a point where that growth starts to plateau. This is always diagnosable to a lack of growth in your sales and marketing firepower. Often what happens is going from, let's say, 100K to $1 million is the entrepreneur focuses a lot on sales and marketing because you have to in order to drive growth, in order to tilt the needle and get the revenues up. And then what happens is the business gets to $1, $2, $3, $4 million, whatever it might be. And the demands of the business internally from a product development and delivery standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a financial management standpoint, from a people and culture standpoint, the internal demands become so much that the entrepreneur who was once out driving growth when the business was doing 6 figures, maybe early 7 figures, has gotten sucked into the vortex to such a degree that they kind of put their head up 2 or 3 years later and go, our growth has actually plateaued over the last couple of years. And it's often not until we have a conversation around it that they identify they used to be doing things that were driving growth. They used to be doing branding exercises. They used to be doing certain marketing activities. They used to be placing a huge emphasis on sales or building a sales team or optimizing a sales process. And as they got sucked into the internal operations, as they got sucked into that vortex, they started to neglect sales and marketing, which, prompted a plateau in their growth. And so it's really important to understand, team, that even if you have the best product in the world, all growth is sales and marketing led. If you want to accelerate growth, it's about, determining and building the infrastructure such that our product development and delivery is sound, our operational infrastructure is sound so that we can handle the growth that we're about to experience. But it's then about how do we build out a marketing engine and a sales process and then build teams within each of those. Whenever I've had a business that has kind of been navigating those early sort of startup years and then has hit a sudden and significant increase in growth trajectory, it has been because we have either placed really good people into marketing and or sales, or we've started to place a strong emphasis on marketing and or sales. All growth is sales and marketing led. If you're not growing at the rate that you would like to, or your growth is plateauing, sales and marketing is where you need to start looking. Principle 6, know your style. Know your style. There are 2 styles of operators that exist inside of organizations, or at least that should exist inside of an organization if it's going to be scalable and sustainable. And it's imperative that you know which one you are. If you do not, it will inhibit your growth and the growth of your company forever. And I do not say that lightly. And if you do understand which style you are, then you're able to complement your style by surrounding yourself with the right people. So let's talk about these 2 different styles. And this is actually from a book called Rocket Fuel. The 2 different styles, team, are, and I want you to write them down. Number 1 is visionary, and number 2 is integrator. In businesses that are sustainable and scalable, we have visionaries and we have integrators. Let's talk about the characteristics of a visionary. A visionary is somebody that sees the future. The visionary is typically a dreamer. The visionary loves the dream of their business more than they actually love the actual business as it exists today. Visionaries see the big picture. We love big problems and we love big opportunities. Visionaries are not good with resource allocation, and I include time in that, meaning we think everything can be done by tomorrow regardless of resource, right? Visionaries are impulsive. We can kind of set off in a particular direction for 60 to 90 days max, then we get bored and we want to go in a different direction. Visionaries are impulsive, right? Visionaries generate ideas. If we look at an integrator obsesses over operational perfection. The degree to which a visionary loves the dream of the business, the integrator loves the operational detail of the business today. The degree to which a visionary is big picture thinker, likes big problems, big opportunities, the integrator loves detail. The degree to which a visionary is inconsiderate of resources, meaning I think we can do everything by tomorrow and I don't see why anyone should have a problem with that. An integrator is actually good at planning and allocating resources accordingly so that we actually have thought through milestones that are achievable and that are considerate of resources. Whereas a visionary is impulsive, an integrator brings sustain, maintain. An integrator is a good anchor. An uneducated visionary that is not aware of their visionariness will cause organizational whiplash, meaning the visionary will go, team, we're going in this direction and it's super exciting and we're going over there. And everyone will follow the visionary because people love following visionaries, right? Visionaries tend to be, charismatic in their own unique way, whatever that might mean. And people like following them. And so your team will follow you in that direction for 2 months and you'll say, stop. Sorry, guys, I know I said we're going that way. We're actually going this other way over here. And everyone will chase you in that direction for 2 or 3 months. Then you'll say, stop. Sorry, guys, I know I said we're going over there, but I was meditating and, my soul spoke to me and said we actually need to go in this direction over here. And then everybody will start running in the other direction. And then 2 months later, you will say, stop. Sorry, guys, I know I said the soul thing, but I was wrong. We actually need to go in this other. And so what occurs is this organizational whiplash where people get whiplash by the visionary going in too many different directions. Who can relate? I'm actually envisaging so many entrepreneurs watching this video or listening to this podcast right now, smiling and nodding along going, yeah, that's me. And so the uneducated visionary who's not aware of their visionariness will cause organizational whiplash. The uneducated visionary will think that the integrator is negative and will think that the integrator weighs them down. The integrator will think that the visionary has their head in the clouds and just doesn't get how much work is involved in making everything happen. And so you need to identify, are you a visionary? Are you an integrator, or are you one of the fortunate few that has a combination of the two? Because here's the thing. If you identify with the characteristics that I ran through of visionaries a moment ago, and about 80% of entrepreneurs do, then you absolutely, categorically need an integrator or several integrators around you to help you with execution and sustainability and actually getting it done to the level of detail that is required to get it done well. Now, if you're an integrator or you're a little bit of both, you probably still want to get to a point where you're playing the role of visionary. And so even if you're an integrator yourself, you still want to surround yourselves with other integrators who can help you make it happen. But you also want to surround yourself, preferably externally. You want to surround yourself with a visionary or two who can actually bring your head up out of the operations of the business and to help you dream, because that's equally as important. And so, team, on your journey to 8 figures, your integrators will change, right? Whether you're a visionary and an integrator, you should be building integrators around you. And your integrators will change. When you're doing 400K revenue, your integrator might be your assistant. When you're doing 800K revenue, your integrators might be an office manager and an assistant. When you're doing $3 million revenue, your integrator might be a general manager, a head of business development, hypothetically, that takes care of sales and marketing, and a GM of product and operations, which takes care of product ops and finance. When you're doing 5 or 6 mil, your integrator might be a CEO, and them as an integrator might have a leadership team or a team of executives under them. And eventually, if you want to build to a point of doing 8 figures, you probably want to get to a point where you have a leadership or executive team fundamentally of integrators. Now, at that level, they will need to have a little bit of visionary in them as well. But eventually, by the time you get to 8 figures, particularly if you want to build a business that can work without you and you just want to be wearing the hat of entrepreneur, meaning not even the hat of CEO, and you determine that. If you want to be the CEO still, rock and roll, you go for it. I tend to put CEOs or COOs in place so that I'm not involved in the executive team at all. I'm there to guide and coach and strategize and lead. But ultimately, I am building an organization that can operationally operate without me. right? And so at 8 figures, your integrators might be a CEO, a director of marketing, a director of sales, a director of product, a director of operations, a director of finance, or a head of finance, and maybe even a director of people and culture, right? And so that's where you're going. But remember we started that whole kind of hypothetical example back at 400K revenue. Each stage we will have different integrators, but it is important to understand that you do need integrators. You do need people that can get it done. You need people that can roll up their sleeves, and you need people who are obsessed about the detail today as much as you obsess about the vision for tomorrow. Principle number 5. This is a tricky one. The people who are right for your business from 0 to 500K are different from the people who are right for your business from, let's say, 500K to 2 mil, are different from the people who are right from 2 to 10 mil. And the reality is, particularly if you're going along that growth curve in a way that is quite quick, if you're going along the growth curve in an accelerated fashion, which I know many of you are, 80% of the team may not keep up. And I battled with this for years, and I know every entrepreneur does. Particularly as you're moving through like 0 to 100K, 100K to a mil to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 8, 8 to 10. The style and the nature of the business changes so quickly that most people in your team won't be able to keep up. As I said, I battled with this for years because in the early years, you have people that are so loyal to the business. And you probably have that through the later years as well. But particularly early on, you've got people that are so loyal to the business. So much so that, if they were with you when you were doing sub $1 million, you were probably paying them less than market wage as well. And in startup, everything's super exciting. And so everybody's going above and beyond. And so you've got these people that are loyal, that are probably not being paid what they're worth, that are going above and beyond. And when you were doing 800K in revenue, they were perfect. But you're now doing 2 or 3 million revenue and they're not. And you're now doing 4 or 5 million in revenue and they've actually become really bad. And some of them are actually your best friends, right? As I said, I battled with this for years. And I probably held on to people, some people, for too long out of misplaced loyalty. And I'll explain in a moment why I think it's misplaced. Because what will happen is the rest of the team will understand that they're no longer perfect for the role. The rest of the team will probably understand that they're only still here or only still in the role that they are because they're friends with you. And the example that sets for the rest of the team is, it's okay if you don't perform, provided you're friends with the founder or the CEO, right? Which is not the culture that you want to establish. And so I remember, again, I battled with this for years because my loyalty lay with some of these select people, to the point where I'd have other team members who were highly capable in my office, and something would have happened, or they've just been putting up with this other person not being super capable for an extended period of time, and they're in my office crying. And I remember one time I had someone sitting opposite me, and I won't mention her name. She was a super brilliant operator. I said, all right, let's stop complaining about this person over here. Let's get solution orientated. Let's write a list. What are the things you need to be happy working here? And she said, fire that person. Like point blank. That was what was required for her to be happy, because she knew that we were hanging on to people purely because they were friends of mine from the early years. And so after wrestling with this literally for years, the point I got to was an understanding that my loyalty needs to lie with the team in its entirety. My loyalty needs to lie with the business in its entirety. My loyalty cannot lie with any one individual, including myself. And so understand that you will come up against moments like this throughout your entire growth curve. And it will never be easy. And sometimes with the right leadership and coaching and management and training and development and education, people will rise with you. Sometimes you'll have people that will just rise with you because they're super high growth individuals and they can keep up. I mean, they're few and far between, but sometimes you will come across those people. I'm not saying the minute someone becomes not right, you assume that they're no longer right and that's it. I actually encourage you to do the complete opposite. Assume that it's a management and leadership issue. Assume that it's a training and development issue and give absolutely everything you can to try and help that person rise. However, if you reach a point where you know and they know and everyone in the team knows that they are no longer right, you do not have permission to keep them around because they are your buddy. Your loyalty needs to lie with the team in its entirety, and your loyalty needs to lie with the business in its entirety. It's a hard lesson, but it's an important one. Principle 4, expect hard times. Expect hard times. They will come. If you're on a journey to build a business to the point where it's doing 8 figures, you will come up against extended periods of time where you will be so challenged and you will question yourself so much, and you may even want to quit for extended periods of time. You need to understand that that is par for the course. You need to understand that that is almost unavoidable. I started Entourage in 2010, and we work with, intelligent business owners that are great at what they do, that want help in how do I build a commercially scalable business model around what I do so that I can ultimately scale to 7, 8, 9 figures in a way that's not reliant on me. That's what we do. We grew, 100 to 200% year on year from 2010 to 2015. In 2015, I was trading at a valuation of $62 million and had built an 8-figure business that was operating without me. However, in 2015, I wanted to go into accredited education, so offering diplomas and advanced diplomas of business specializing in entrepreneurship, because there was a lot of people coming out of high school or going through university that wanted to drop out and wanted to come and study at the Entourage because they recognize that we train and develop entrepreneurs who can go out and genuinely create real commercial success. And so we became a registered training organization, an RTO. I went into diplomas and advanced diplomas, which is essentially government accreditation and government funding. We entered that space incredibly successfully from a student acquisition perspective, student onboarding perspective, student retention perspective, student completion rates perspective. On many metrics, we were literally 10x the industry average of like student completion rates and student success rates. We were very, very, very good at it. After being in that space for 6 months, the government essentially said, if you're new to this space, if you've arrived into this RTO space over the last 2 years, we're not going to pay you for the next 6 months. What had happened was there was a number of dodgy providers, dodgy RTOs in Australia, and it's with the vocational education and training industry, so VET for short, that were signing up people that were never going to finish courses and essentially using the system to their financial advantage to really rort the taxpayer. And so the government said, well, what's happening, to the industry? They said, what's happening is we're paying these people, we're later figuring out they're dodgy, and then it's too late to sort of pull the money back. So we're just not paying anybody that's entered the space over the last 2 years. We're not paying you for 6 months. 6 months became 9 months. And so for us, that was a cumulative cash lag of $6 million, or a cash hole, I should say, of $6 million. And so if you can imagine, you've still got all the students, and student delivery and student support and student service is non-negotiable for us. So we weren't prepared to pull that back or taper it. Still got all the team, the employees. You've got the leases. You've got all of the expenses that you would in the business. You're even recognizing the revenue on the P&L. You're just not getting the cash. And so for anybody that's been through cash strain periods, you know that even if you're getting the money in 9 months' time, going through 9 months of cash strain halts recruitment, it halts salary increases, it halts marketing spend. It contracts what the whole business can do because we don't have the cash flows and the resources to operate as we normally would. And so that cash lag was about $6 million over a 9-month period. And that was the easy part relative to what came next. So how did I fund that $6 million cash gap? Equity, debt, invoice factoring, selling a lot of my stuff, propping up the company personally. And then what happened in October of 2016, so about 6 months into that cash lag, is the government changed the regulations completely, giving everybody 3 months notice, which essentially meant it was no longer viable. If you wanted to deliver education and training in a thorough way, it was no longer going to be viable for you to do that, and you had 3 months notice. So for us, that meant we were coming out of the space. What that meant for us at that point in time is that we were 3 months away from a monthly loss of $800,000. I'll say that again. We were 3 months away from a monthly loss of $800,000. And we weren't in a position where we had high cash reserves or high cash at bank because we had just been through a period where we'd been starved of cash for 6 to 9 months. And so what that meant for us is we were 3 months away from not having a business model, 3 months away from not having any products in play that we're going to be able to sustain beyond a 3-month period. We needed to go from 90 people to 40 people, and we needed to do that in a matter of days, which when you have a culture like we do here at the Entourage is similar to cutting off your right arm. It's a really, really, really painful process to go through. And such begun the hardest, probably 2 to 3 years of my entire life. No business model that was going to sustain beyond 3 months. No product suite that was going to sustain beyond 3 months. Probably $4 or $5 million in the hole in terms of debt. Zero cash reserves. Carrying a huge expense base that wasn't huge when prior to the changes coming through, but once the accredited revenue got sort of stripped away from the company, the expense base far outweighed the revenues, hence looking at extreme monthly losses. The other thing is that when your business gets into hard times, it's not just commercial, it's not just financial. There's a lot of, it's personal, right? For the founder, for the owner, for the entrepreneur, it's personal. Even for me, when I was the age of 24, I bought my mum's house so that she could live somewhere without paying a mortgage or paying rent, essentially helping her to retire. Now, I had a mortgage against that property, and so now I was, 2016, how old was I? 5 years ago. So, 28, 29. And it was categorically looking as if the business was going to go under. I had a mortgage against Mum's house, a house that I owned that Mum lived in. And when you carry bank debt in your business, they cross-collateralize it against your mortgage. So if the business did go under, which it was looking like it was categorically going to, then Mum would have been homeless, and I wouldn't have had the funds or the cash flow to support her beyond that period, right? And so you literally could not have written a worse script. I was meeting with administrators and liquidators throughout this period, which are people that wind up businesses. And they were all saying the same thing. They were all saying, you cannot trade out of this. This is too dire. You guys are fucked. You're gone. And I just refused to accept that as a reality. And so, I gave us about a 10% chance of surviving the next 3 months. And if we survived the next 3 months, I gave us about a 10% chance of surviving the next 12 months. So all in all, I probably allocated about a cumulatively 1% chance of survival to the company, which was probably quite accurate. And so for 3 weeks, I literally sat in the boardroom with my COO and my CFO at the time, and we put up whiteboards against the windows so that people couldn't see in, because we were literally trying to rebuild a business model, not from the ground up. Ground up would have been fucking easy. Starting again would have been a fucking walk in the park relative to starting from $4 to $5 million down, looking at monthly losses of $800,000, which are going to start to accrue in 3 months' time. That's a significantly harder task than starting from zero. And so we did that, and it was literally draw up a plan on the whiteboard. Does it work? All factors considered. Nah, rub it off. Okay, let's go again. It's someone else, whiteboard marker, stand up, let's go, draw the next play. Is that going to work? No, it doesn't work for A, B, or C reason. Literally just day in, day out, go home, not sleep, come back the next day, walk into the boardroom, whiteboards up against the window so nobody could see, draw up the plays, draw up the plays, draw up the plays, draw up the plays. And it's about how do you, number one, enable the company to survive. Number two, how do you hold on to as many people as you possibly can? Number three, how do you get back to a point of profitability as quickly as possible? And number four, how do you fund any losses between now and then, particularly given how grim the outlook was? It obviously becomes increasingly more difficult to fund, to raise external funding when you're in a position as dire as the one we were in. So there was literally no good things happening at all. It was all dark. It was all dark. And I still remember there was one moment where I was sitting in my office. The other thing that had happened almost just coincidentally was our landlord at our premise, our Entrepreneur Development Centre in Sydney, had stopped maintaining the building. I think they wanted to lose us as a tenant, not because they didn't like us. We always paid rent on time and all of that sort of stuff. But because they had another tenant teed up and we were coming up to renewal and they didn't want us to renew. And so they stopped maintaining the building. And so I remember literally one day I was sitting in my office and it was raining outside, and because I hadn't been maintaining the building, there was a very large flood in the top right-hand corner of my roof in my office. And so I'm sitting there. The building we're in is literally falling apart. There's a fucking waterfall coming through my roof. And I looked around and I just thought, everything is not only physically crumbling, but that is a representation and it's almost symbolic of what's going on in a business sense and in a personal sense and in a financial sense. And it was the beginning of an era where it was an incredibly difficult 2, 3, or 4 years that followed. Now, during those periods, all you can do is say to yourself, this is not going to be fun. I may not have fun as I persevere through this particular challenge, but I will get through it. I will accept no different reality. And so for me, I kind of go into this, almost shut off my conscious mind and go into this. It's almost like at a conscious level, I go, I'm not going to enjoy the next couple of years. And that was true. And I kind of go into this subconscious way of being where it's like, I will just do what needs to be done every day. And outside of that, I'll try and enjoy myself as much as is humanly possible. And so it's one foot in front of the other, in front of the other, in front of the other on a daily basis for many years at a time in this particular instance. If you fast forward 2.5 to 3 years later, we were more profitable than ever. We were growing faster than ever. Our members were more mature than ever because we were more mature than we had been in the past. Our member success stories were greater than ever. Our culture was significantly better than ever. We had grown up and we had grown more in 3 years than we had in the previous 8. We were now more considerate of risk management. We were now more considerate of the downside. We were smarter. We were wiser. We were faster. We were more well-trained. It was literally the hardest 3 years of my life, but I have grown more in those 3 years than I had the previous 30. And so expect hard times. They will come. But if you don't quit, they will make you better. Expect them, and when they come, lock in. Principle number 3, learn to rest, not quit. Learn to rest, not quit. In 2015, I was super burnt out. I'd been, started Entourage in 2010. Prior to that, I'd been running a company called MBE Group for 3 years, which became one of Australia's fastest growing companies. And we had just had a couple of years of crazy growth with the Entourage, and I was investing in other businesses, and we'd just done an international tour of unconventions. And I woke up, it was a Wednesday, and I remember this clear as day. I literally could not get out of bed. I literally could not get out of bed. I would have been 27 or 28 at the time, super young, super healthy, somebody that prides themselves on their sense of resilience and bounce back ability. And it was the strangest feeling. It was one of the strangest feelings I've ever had in my life, which is I wasn't sick, I wasn't injured, and I could not fucking stand up. And so I touched base with my team and I said, I'm not well. I'm going to need the day off today. Can you guys help me reschedule everything that I've got on today? And so they started to do that. And I had an interview at Nova, the radio station, that afternoon at like 3 o'clock or something. That we obviously couldn't reschedule, and so I needed to get out of bed for that. And it was sometimes in radio interviews, they've got mics like the one I'm speaking into now, like you guys can see, mics around the room, and you're kind of standing up as you're doing the interview. It was probably a 8 to 10 minute interview, but I was standing rather than sitting. I almost didn't get through the entire interview because I almost wasn't able to stand up for 8 to 10 minutes. And after the interview, go to ad break, everyone's kind of standing around talking. I literally had to walk out of the room, walk back into my car, and have my friend drive me home and go back into bed. I was absolutely gone. Now, what followed wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a month off or 2 months off. What followed was 2016 and the hardest 3 years of my life. And so I was burned out prior to that, right? And so when I say learn to rest, not quit, I am totally familiar with and understand and get that we don't always have the time or the opportunity, or we're not in the financial position to rest right there and then. And so one of the things that I needed to learn how to do was build practices into my everyday life that enabled me to continue to get the most out of myself. This is when I really started to lean into meditation. This is when I really started to lean into hot and cold immersion. This is when I really started to lean into training and exercising. This is when I really started to lean into eating well, right? And minimizing anything that wasn't nutritious in my diet. I literally had to take my discipline and my entire lifestyle up several notches in terms of my ability to take care of myself in order to just sustain, let alone to optimize, right? And so, however, you ultimately do get to a point where you can rest, right? And we want to learn to rest, not quit. And so we turned 10 in April of 2020. And I had a couple of my entrepreneurial buddies in a couple of years in the lead up to that. They said, Jack, when the company turns 10, you have to take a long service leave. Never heard of long service leave in my life. And after having the conversation with a couple of entrepreneurs that I have a huge amount of respect for, and seeing some other entrepreneurs that I had a huge amount of respect for actually go and do it, I thought, okay, I may do something similar when the time is right. And so in June of 2020, I decided to take a few months off and went to Byron Bay. And that was a very interesting exercise. When I got to Byron Bay, staying at this Airbnb overlooking the beach, it was a beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful property with my then partner and some beautiful friends. And what confronted me was relatively scary in that when I got to Byron, my entire body and soul went, okay, we have, I think I was planning to take 3 months off. So we have 3 months off. And again, my entire body and soul kind of collapsed. And I didn't want to do anything. I had lost my entire drive to the point where, I'm always carrying books with me everywhere I go. But to the point where if I saw a book on personal development or business, I would have a physical reaction to it and feel sick. It was super bizarre. And what I put it down to is I had been in this mode, probably from when I was about 14 to then I was 33. So let's say 19 years, where I was so super obsessed with personal growth and optimization that even on a Sunday, I'd be doing hot, cold immersion, reading books, meditating. Everything I was doing to optimize self so that come Monday, come game day, I was 110% again. Every single thought that that I had for 19 years was completely and utterly directed towards personal and commercial growth, so that I could increase the impact that I could make on the world. And that's all I had thought about. And without ever having any sort of break for any extended period of time. And so I got to Byron, and it was the opposite. I wanted to watch movies. I wanted to eat bad food. I had zero desire to train. I had zero desire to meditate. Anything that was good for me, I had zero desire to do. Not because it was good for me, but because I'd held on to it so tightly and so obsessively for 19, 20 years that I just needed a rest. I just needed some escape, right? And so my whole body and soul needed to escape that obsessive growth and optimization completely. And was it a little bit scary sometimes? Yes, it was, because I'd kind of think to myself, wow, like, am I going to get that fire in my belly back? Am I going to, get that sort of level of drive back? And when will that happen? Like, is this a 1 month thing? Is it a 3 month thing? Is it a 12-month thing? And to be honest, I think, for that period to that extreme was probably a 3-month period. And then I got to a point where I really wanted to start training again. And then you start training again, you want to start reading again, then you want to start meditating again. And, now I'm, March 2021. Now I'm not back in full flight, but probably 80% there. So I think from the time I got to Byron, which was June last year, probably until June this year, it's probably a 12-month spell, right? It's probably a 12-month exercise to just regroup and rest and process the last 20 years and to do so without any constraints. Now, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this principle, which is I know that not everybody has that privilege. And if we go back to 2015, I didn't have that privilege either. And it was followed by, 4 or 5 years of an incredibly difficult period. So I get that. And so if you're in that position, then it's about find practices that enable you to optimize and sustain and maintain as it is. But when you get the opportunity, rest. We have to learn to rest and not quit. Principle number 2, don't lose yourself. Don't lose yourself. I was having a conversation with a dear friend recently, and we were talking about how in business, whether you are going through heightened periods of growth or an extended plateau or a period of decline, it's really easy to lose yourself. She had an ex-partner that had gone through many years of hypergrowth in a particular business and bought the Lamborghini and did all of the things that, young male entrepreneurs do when they get their first taste of financial success. And she said he lost himself. He lost himself in the growth. He lost himself in the money. And in doing so, the growth of the business was not sustained. In fact, it ultimately started to go backwards, and that business actually failed because the entrepreneur lost their head as they were going through high growth periods. If you think about when a business plateaus, particularly if it's plateaued for many, many years, an entrepreneur can lose themselves because they get a little bit frustrated and a little bit bored and a little bit down because they don't see a path to ever achieving high growth again. And so they get a bit bored and they check out and they almost lose that fire in their belly. And then when an entrepreneur is in decline, like we experienced in 2016, everything is so bad that you can get into periods where you're just so all consumed by the challenges that are presented in the current circumstance that you start to lose touch and disconnect with self, right? And so at times business will be all consuming. If you're growing very steeply, it's all consuming. If you're going down or declining, it's all consuming. And you'll miss family time. You'll miss time with friends. You'll miss out on, sometimes weddings or babies being born, or hopefully not your babies being born, but, friends, family, babies being born, or whatever it might be. And there's all these sacrifices that will almost out of necessity need to be made. as we go through our journey in business. It's incredibly important that we learn the skill and the art of staying connected to self. And so even when you're going through periods of high growth, even when you're going through periods of high decline, making sure that you stick and stay on top of your personal rituals, the rituals that when you do, you fill up. The rituals that when you do, you connect with self. The rituals that when you do, it enables you to stay in touch with self. And that might be time with family. It might be time with kids. It might be meditation. It might be yoga. It might be exercise. It might be walking by the ocean. It might be playing guitar. It might be painting. It might be journaling. It might be sleeping. It might be reading. It might be drinking tea. Whatever it is for you, you need to know what your personal connection rituals are, and you then need to do them. I said earlier that when a business is going through hyper growth, we can lose ourselves. When a business is going through a decline, we can lose ourselves. You will get to a point where you transcend being absolutely dictated to by business performance, meaning the business will be able to go through periods of high growth without you thinking you're fucking awesome. The business will be able to go through periods of decline without thinking you're absolutely worthless and going into a mild depression, right? You want to get to a point where you've transcended the trends and the performance of your business or the world at large, where you are, as much as is possible, a whole and nurtured and loving and compassionate and joyful human being. And you want to live from that place. We live in a world that makes the external supreme, right? Where it's all about how the business is doing, or what car are you driving, or how does the relationship look on Instagram, or what house do you live in? And it's all about attainment, and it's all about consumerism. And if your ego is attached to all of that, and if you identify with all of that, then when you have it, you'll become arrogant. And when you don't, you'll become insecure and depressed. And neither are good. Transcend that bullshit, right? When you live from an inner state of being truly connected to the essence and the truth of who you are, then you will be uninfluenced and undeterred regardless of what's going on in the world around you. What's more important than the external is your inner state of being. And so typically entrepreneurs early in their journey get kind of addicted to angst and anxiety and stress and grit, and there's a bit of martyrdom that goes into it, and hustle and all this kind of things. And don't get me wrong, hard work and hustle and grit certainly play a part. But you can do all of that while being whole. You can do all of that while being connected to self. You can do all of that to an even greater degree if you are nourished and you are looking after yourself. And so keep pursuing the goals. There's nothing wrong with having a great car and having a great relationship and living in nothing wrong with any of that. My question is, what fuel are you using? And the importance of staying connected to self, regardless of what's going on in the external. Which brings me to principle number one, which is principle number one of building an 8-figure business that is scalable and sustainable and that can grow beyond you, is that you can. You can do this. You can build a business to any size that you choose. If you accept that you need to be a person that is always learning, if you accept that you're going to need to change tact to find the right model, the right product or service suite, the right marketing plays, the right sales processes, the right team, people are going to come and go. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. If you accept that it's not going to be linear, you can build a business to whatever size that you choose. It's amazing to me, having spoken to, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs throughout the years, everybody from, seed stage businesses to startup stage businesses doing around 7 figures, to scale stage businesses doing around 7 to 8 figures, to some of the world's, most iconic entrepreneurs that I've worked with and become friends with, many of them, Sir Richard Branson, Mark Boris, Steve Wozniak, Janine Allis from Boost Juice, Christina from Kiki K, the list goes on. Scott Farquhar from Atlassian. What's amazing to me to look at entrepreneurs and having spoken to so many entrepreneurs over my lifetime is that if an entrepreneur sets out to build $1 million business, chances are you'll speak to them in 10 years and they will have built $1 million business. If an entrepreneur sets out to build a $100 million business, chances are you'll speak to them. If they're capable and they've got grit and they'll keep learning and they'll keep adapting, chances are you'll speak to them in 10, 15, 20 years and they will have built a $100 million business. If an entrepreneur sets out to build a $1 billion business, often that's exactly what they will do if they possess the characteristics required to get there. One of the things my meditation teacher, a dear friend of mine, a guy called Tom Cronin, says to me around meditation and spirituality is he says, Jack, you can play this game at any level you choose. And so I say the same thing to you guys as entrepreneurs, as business owners, or you might be an executive, or you might just be a high-growth human being, you know, pursuing a very worthwhile career, or you might be an artist. But you can play this game at any level you choose. You don't choose by sitting there, crossing your fingers and going, I kind of sort of maybe one day want to do it and I'm going to try and manifest it. You choose what level you play at by the level of capability you consciously develop. I'll say that again. You choose what level you play at by the level of capability you consciously develop. Everything's a skill. Building a business is a skill. Being a visionary is a skill. Leading people is a skill. Building an 8-figure business is a skill. Building a 9 or a 10-figure business is a skill. It's all a skill. And if you haven't built an 8-figure business that's scalable and sustainable that can grow beyond you yet, all that tells me is you haven't yet developed the capabilities. But today we've spoken about 11 of the core fundamental lessons that if you embody just these 11 principles, if you embody just these 11 lessons, then you will, believe me, have the capability to build an 8-figure business that is scalable, sustainable, and that can grow beyond you. And so as I reflect over 11 years in Entourage and, probably 15, 16 years of business, the most fundamental underlying truth to absolutely everything I could share with you guys is that you can. You can play this game at any level you choose. You can scale to whatever degree you choose. You can grow into any character, in terms of the characteristics that you want to grow into, and any human that you choose to. You can. And so knowing that, just decide. Decide what level you want to play at in the next 5, 10 years, and you may raise the bar. You might even bring the bar back at some points when you want to have a rest or when you determine that that's not the right path for you or whatever it might be. But decide on what you want. Decide on who you need to become in order to build it. Decide on what are the capabilities you need to start developing in yourself and your team. And principle number 1, guys, is you absolutely can. You can do whatever the fuck you choose. Just decide. So team, those are the 11 core principles for how do you build an 8-figure business that's scalable, sustainable, and that can grow beyond you. If you're listening to this on a podcast or watching it on the video, let us know in the comments below what principle most applies to you. What principle was the biggest aha moment for you? Let us know in the comments below. I will be there, and I look forward to chatting with you all soon.